Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities and Miniatures. Today we're going to take a look at some models that I recently printed out. They come to us from Battle Yak Miniatures. They are the Primal Heart Eldarch. And the Primal Heart Eldarch, as you can see with this sample body in front of us, are very insect-like elf types. And I gotta give Battle Yak credit for the fact that these guys are even more crazy modular than the last set of models he made, which were the Blighterghast Kludge Brutes. I believe that's what they were called. Anyway, so we have a couple of various bodies. This body in front of me is actually a little bit modified already. It has some extra appendages on the back. It's got an abdomen on there, the shoulder pads. Those are actually all customizable parts. This is the same exact body, but it's missing a lot of those extra goodies. And the reason it's missing those extra goodies is because why let somebody else do all the fun stuff when we can do it ourselves? So we have fun fin options. We can have sticking all over their backs. Extra armored shells. Got extra tails and stingers. So lots of fun little pieces. And there's quite a few body types. Again, I printed out a few that have already been modified just to give a good sampling. Set those there. And there's also a larger boss monster version, for lack of a better term, and even crazier. So this guy's got even more options available. Sadly, his abdomens are not compatible with the smaller ones. It's basically either it's a part of the body to begin with or not. There is another option for a tailed version, if you'd rather have a tail than a giant spiky stinger. But what's interesting is there are special options that are only available to the big guys, like these giant extra talons. We haven't even gone over the heads yet. And these actually, since they are separate pieces, can be modified and shrunken down so you can actually have them attached to the smaller ones as well. Our boss friend also has a nice big pair of wings that can attach. And again, you can shrink those down and they'll work for the smaller guys as well too. So lots of different options for the bodies. We haven't even talked about the heads. Tons of heads. Some are quite crazy to have to print out and cut out. This one was a real trip. Lots of little armored elfy faces. They are supposed to be elves. They're a bit different than the usual elves. And they got the little mandible things going on there on a lot of them. Lots of mohawks, lots of spikes. So I want to say there's at least 8 or 9 different heads, probably. There's a lot. And then, in addition to that, there are all sorts of weapons. We've got swords, we've got javelins, we've got big, spiky, bladed dagger things. We've got Guyver blades. Those are fun. Shuriken glaive things. Double-bladed glaive things. Knives. Sickles. I mean, there's just piles of this stuff at this point. There's so many options. For the bigger guys, if you want to shrink them down, we've got giant hook blades. We've got somewhere... Sorry, there's all kinds of other parts. Snaky tentacle things coming out of your hand. Giant hands, because why have little ones, right? So lots of different stuff available, and then there's also various shoulder pad designs. That's not a shoulder pad, that's a head. So lots of different stuff available to these guys. Lots of different options, and if you really like something different and you want to see some really interesting, bizarre looking guys, I think we're going to have to go put some of these together, and I'm going to show you just how funky they can be. Alright, we got our Eldarch all put together here and glued, and we're going to see some interesting base size fluctuation here, because they really can kind of fit on almost anything. It really depends how you want to set them up. So obviously this one right now is on a 40mm base, and they are very spiny and spiky. Those are not all support scars. But then I thought, well, could we? Could we possibly stick one on a 25mm base? And yeah, just barely. He kind of overhangs it. But then I thought, okay, well, maybe, what about settling on a 30mm base? Will that work better? And I think that's probably the key, but this guy's stance is so wide. It is actually the same body as his friend right there. And surprisingly, I think you can probably squeeze them. If you can fit almost on a 25, you should be able to fit on a 30. But they are quite big and quite protruding with their various parts of their bodies, as you can see there. But they should paint up pretty nice. And I'm just trying to figure out what they can possibly be used for. My first thought was they make some interesting Tyranid style things, but they're supposed to be a elf race, and the only elf races that I think are probably even close would be the Sylvaneth stuff from Age of Sigmar. And funny enough, they stack up pretty nicely. If you were going to do a very nature-themed army, I think these would make some interesting choices for your infantry. They're just so vastly different from what we usually come to expect from elves. I know there were a couple of companies, I know Rackham had a few kind of bugmen, but nobody really seems to really run wild with the idea of bug people, so I'm all for it. So these are what they called the Phylarch Imago. These are the smaller ones. But then, as I was showing you the parts earlier, we went ahead and built up some of the Predators, and that's the larger bodied ones. But again, with the whole modular nature of these guys, you really could get away with shrinking them down. You could remove the extra arms. You could put some kind of totally different tail on there. I gave him Guyver arms. You could switch up the head. This is the special Predator head, the bigger head crest, but if you wanted to go with one of the smaller bodied ones, you can always upscale those or play around with, Blender or Meshmixer and stick it all together. But just the sheer variety of optional parts really makes for some interesting designs. And of course, we had to go all in on the crazy spikes, because obviously 2 spikes aren't enough. We need at least 8. 8's a good number. And yeah, that blue tech is not even going to hold him up. And they're on 50mm bases, which they sit on pretty easily. If you wanted to go bigger, you probably could. 60 might work. Obviously you can see, especially with the back attachments, they take up a lot of space on those bases. Without it, maybe not so much, and you might even be able to squeeze on a 40 if you wanted, especially if you use some of the more giant gauntlet style hands. But again, I think if you are the creative types, you certainly could come up with some interesting ideas on how to use these. You could always scale them down. I was actually thinking it might be kind of fun to have some really small versions as, like half-size bugmen, but I gotta get my printer all sorted and straightened out in the time being before I can start fiddling around with that kind of stuff. And I think this is one of the last larger sized models that I was able to get onto that plate before it decided to go kaput. Grabbing a couple other humans. So just so you can see, if you want giant elven bug people, I think printing them as is going to definitely give you what you want. You could absolutely scale them to different sizes, and especially if you wanted to use some of the more optional bits from one size to another, like those wings and attach them to everybody. If you want fully airborne bugmen, it would work. So something interesting, something different. And at the very least, with Battle Yak's release next month, which is a kind of mix of Space Marine type power armor with Doomslayer aesthetics for their Sentinels of Primus range that they're going to be working on, might be worth having them as adversaries for that, and I'm looking forward to those just as much. So we'll put a link down below for Battle Yak Miniatures info in case you're curious, and I will bid you all a fond farewell. This has been High Lord Tamberlane with Obscurities and Miniatures, saying thanks for watching. We'll see you back here soon. Bye-bye.